and I'm interviewing Misha Sakharov. Misha Sakharov is an integrative health engineer who helps people, his clients, to cure themselves of cancer. And this is number 3 in a series of interviews. And so far we have covered the subjects of the energy inputs, the breathing. We've covered Buteyko breathing and the Bohr effect. We've briefly talked about the ketogenic diet. We talked about the influences from the Far East that Misha's incorporated into his engineering-based approach to this, such as Kaizen, Hara, and Dharma Marga. So, today we are going to talk about the so-called single point of attention. So, without further ado, we'll ask Misha to enlighten us on the single point of attention and how this helps his clients. Go ahead, Misha.
Thank you, Steve, and hi, everybody. Replay viewers, and yeah. So, well, this is a very interesting topic. We have this series for people that have cancer, but it's the same tool, mental tools that we all need, all of us, we need. Both normal people in our normal life, performers, top performers, people that are athletes or artists, to avoid fear.
Okay.
Why is it? That's the 3rd video. You remember the topic for the first one, Steve? What was it?
Well, we were talking the original one. We were talking about the 5-pointed, the pentagram, the star.
Yeah,
we were talking about the inputs, and we were talking about the distribution of the energy that we take from the air and from nutrition, and in which directions we implement that energy. So and we need mental processes.
Yeah, we've been covering the overview of what kind of approaches we need to combine to get the strong synergetic effect. Because to heal cancer medicine free, we have to have the strategy, we have to have tactics, and we have to establish a process. So you see, that's the blab number 3. I can't believe you. That's a new word for me. That's a new word. Blab. Well, that's then interview number 3, and we are talking about a mental side.
Okay.
How to deal with cancer, how to work towards self-healing. And that's a very, very strong technique, and that's a very important side of healing. Because when you have cancer, the worst thing you have, it's fear.
Yeah.
The fear, it's actually can prevent all the other things from working.
Wow.
You see it like yesterday. We had the part 2. We've been talking about process a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
And we have this pentagram, and we are using 5 elements of healing. We're using the physical part, the immune part, the mental part, and then we use the energy acquisition from the environment. That's breathing and nutrition. And you see, we talked about that. We can talk about all of these 5 things from now several hours. But if we don't establish the process, nothing will work. Yeah. That's the same thing. The process and the mental side are actually interconnected very much and interdependent.
Okay.
In order to establish the process, we have to really accept many things.
Such as?
We have to accept not thinking about the outcome. Because if we're not thinking about the outcome, it's then we deal with the very interesting aspect of goal-oriented way of working, and it's called the I forgot. That's must be Alzheimer's.
Well, is it the Kaizen?
No, but you see, that's a Kaizen, right? But the end point. How do we call it? They call it the fejlslutning in Danish. It's called the fault of the end point. And what does it mean?
I think I understand what you mean. You say that if you have to break this down into small steps, into small processes, because if you just think about the end result, then it will always seem like a mountain that you cannot climb. Would you say that? That's an analogy.
One aspect of it, but you see, what I'm talking about, it's the it's coined by philosopher, Italian philosopher Stefano Sabetti.
Okay.
His book it's called Key to Psychology, and key it's like
KI.
But it's a KI, yeah. It's energy psychology, energy. And the energy process. And what he's talking about, it's that if we don't accept fully that the process and not the goal oriented, then we cannot sleep for fear 100%. That's the problem, you see.
Okay, so the first you have to overcome the fear, because the fear is blocking, and you do it by applying this psychology to it.
That's right. If you all the time will think that you have to win, you have to win, you have to be cancer-free, you have to become cancer-free, you will always doubt at the same time. That's the two sides of the same case, you see?
Yeah, I understand.
Yes. And that's a philosophical thing. That's why working with mental side is so crucial, because otherwise it will not work. All the other methods will not work optimally. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, it sounds like a good philosophy for everything in life, actually.
That's what I'm talking about. That's good philosophy for everything. That's good philosophy for relationship. That's good philosophy for establishing good teams at work. The good philosophy to talk with your
Spouse.
friends,
Partner.
your spouses, your parents, if they're still there for you, and your children. And you see, what I'm talking about, it's a very it's a technique that's very practical.
Yeah.
Today we are talking practice, and that's called one-pointed attention. The thing is that if we learn this samurai technique that actually saved samurai from fear of death, that the ultimate, wouldn't you say that?
It is the ultimate, isn't it? So you have to, I can understand that.
And that's, and it worked for them. So they actually started to train their children in single point of attention since they were 4. And it's described in a couple of books I can show you.
Yes, please do. Everyone take a note of this. These are important books.
That's the book. That's a Danish. It's called De Fem Ringes Bog, but it's a book of Miyamoto Musashi. It's called
Miyamoto Musashi.
That's right. It's the Book of 5 Rings.
The Book of 5 Rings.
5 Rings. And the other book, it's called The Life-Giving Sword. The
Life-Giving Sword.
Yeah. And the Secret Teachings from the House of Shogun is Yagui Munenori.
Yagui Munenori.
Yeah, he was the rival of this guy.
Okay.
His rivals. There's 2 samurais, and they write about the mental side. These books are so much enriching, enriching experience, and very, very inspiring. And from the practitioners
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
They are not only philosophers; they're also philosophers, but they are taught to be practitioners, warriors. You see, for them, this knowledge was not just the theory. It was highly practical. So this point in Japan, they call it Hara point, where you train, it's 1 point. So it's literally, to understand, it's 1 point of attention. This is this point, and now I'll show you where it is. This is the navel. It's 3 centimeters.
Very nice. Yes.
It's the top of the belly.
Okay.
The top of the belly, and the Japanese took it from the Chinese, for 1600 years ago, and the Chinese had 3 points. They called it tanden.
Okay.
The Chinese took it for 2,500 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, actually, from India. Okay. From 7 chakras in India. So 7 chakras. Oh yeah. Initially were condensed into 3 chakras. 3 chakras, and then the Japanese, that was the latest thing, they condensed it into 1. And you see,
this is the 3rd chakra.
That's right. As a warrior, you see, that's a very nice thing to have. You have only 1 point to deal with, so you can actually train it in extreme stress. Okay. So that's why it has a so big value for us that work with cancer, because we deal with extreme stress, and that's a stress of death, especially when I work with people that have deadly tumors that are not cured by conventional medicine. They cannot say to themselves, I go to the chemotherapy, I go to, I get pills, chemo, and I get radiation, and eventually I'll be free from the illness. They cannot say that because they know for sure that is incurable.
So they have to be in control of the mental processes. They have to find that strength.
That's right. Especially if they're going to deal with a medicine-free healing protocol. Yeah. Because, otherwise, you really have to be strong. And I feel lucky because until now, I worked with people that this protocol would help. So would help to find the center, to find their core, the inner core. And I cannot say that they totally avoid fear. No. But you see, but it helped them to train. Okay. Because what I want to help them to establish a process. I want them to work. You see. Okay. And
but then, do you so you give them lessons, like one-on-one lessons in how to adopt this philosophy and work it into the processes, work it into the program you have?
That's right. That's both philosophical teachings, and it's that's theory. Actually, they have to understand the theory of physiology too, because in order to really believe in something, you have to understand the physiology of self-healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until the best would be we would understand it until the degree where we could, to quote the monk that once was asked if he believes in God, whether he believes in God. Yeah. And he said, "No, I don't believe. I know."
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very, very wise thing to say, I would say. Absolutely. So do all your, does everyone who comes to you, do they accept this, or do you have to, or do some kind of disqualify themselves from this process because they can't overcome their fear, or what sort of things get in the way?
All of my clients, we have a trial period of 1 week where I get, we start with a session, 1.5 hour session. or 2-hour session. I always, the first week, a little bit bigger. They get some something to read. They get some videos, and then I give them access to the log. They have to show that to me that every day they will work and put the results that we start with already the first week.
Okay.
We can do that, and if we can't communicate during the first week, then we cannot work together.
Okay. Tell me, I hope I'm not taking you off subject at all, but the Hara. We want to talk about the Hara because as what I can see here is that the way we think, we tend to think that our head is the center of our body, and it's not, right? And what you're saying here is that we have to rethink and make this point, which is 3 centimeters below the navel, the belly button, right? That we have to then think of this as the center, which actually is the center. How difficult is that a process to move people from up here to down there?
You see, it depends on who you are. If you were interested in personal development, then you probably would be closer to understanding of this. You see, I have to, why I talked about the first week of that we find out if we can work together. Because you see, I want my client to understand that the protocol is solely physiological. There's no new age, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
In a blend. It's only physiology. And also the Hara, which single point of attention, that I very, very slowly interweave into my physiological protocol. I want them to understand. I start explaining this by physiology of relaxation.
Because people do get scared when you start talking about spirituality and things like that.
No, I mean, we can talk about spirituality, but it's very, very, very high level. We are not using spirituality on this level.
You're using what's there, science.
That's right. I'm using science, and every one of my clients are free to use spirituality, and they're also free to talk to me about this, about spirituality, how they use it. It's okay, but I'm not working with this level. I'm only working with science. So how I start getting people into this area of that can be mistaken of spiritual and new age.
Yeah, esoteric. Yeah.
New age. That's right. I have to be strictly physiological. That's why I'm start working with exercises of relaxation of the belly region, and starting, teaching people about these how to shift between two reactions of our body, or two states of our nervous system. That's called the stress response. The first one is called sympathetic. The sympathetic stress response, and then a parasympathetic. And parasympathetic is relaxation. So the first one we call fight or flight, 2F. Sometimes we call it 3 Fs, fight or flight or freeze. And sometimes we call it 4 Fs.
Okay.
Flight or freeze, or this word with FUCK. Because that's right. The erection and the intercourse, it's the stress reaction. It's actually the hormone.
That's nice to know.
That's right. That's right. And that's the difference when we're talking sex and nearness. And that's the difference, because that's the 4 Fs. It's a stress reaction, is a sympathetic response. And the nearness, you see, the how we call it also. We call it being close to each other, that's actually parasympathetic response.
That's very interesting, because
different sense of hormones that work there.
Okay, but that's interesting because you're talking about this within one person. But how does this with the Hara? How can it? I'm not getting off subject, but how does it relate?
You mean that derailing the subject into sex? And
no, I'm not. No. I tell you what. But you. What about this? The connection. The connection with the with the Hara, and because when we communicate normally we communicate with a voice. Obviously, it's very important, and we communicate with our eyes, and therefore we're also using mental processes. But from what you're saying here, there is a third process involved here somewhere. There must be.
That's right, and then we come back to our flow of understanding how we work with fear. So what we're talking about here is that's right. We have another center that we always thought is in the head, because we are very, very thinking, and this world is based on thought very much, especially the last century is, and maybe 2 centuries, maybe 3 centuries before we have been much more physical, you see. So, and when we have thoughts, then we have feelings, and those two, they used to connect very, very tightly together, and drive the whole show. Whole show. So what actually happens here, that we cut the lower part off. We have a heart, hurt. We always say heart equal hurt. Then we have our thoughts, we have the brains, and then our sensitivity, get cut off. And so what we can enable in order to avoid fear, it's to work with, again, enabling the sensitivity.
Yeah.
We can only train to be fearless, to be warriors, only through enabled sensitivity. We cannot train to have a warrior mindset through thoughts, understanding, and heart feelings. We cannot, because we will get hijacked by everything, and our reactions would be, there's a lot of physiological explanation. There's a tension. There's if we are highly trained warriors, for example, we would do wrong movements because simply of the tension in the muscles here, the tension here, actually also the tension around the jaw. They will go down, and they will make our movements wrong through tension of antagonist muscles.
Yeah, I think
we will die. So
okay. I was just thinking one example. It's always quite amazing that when they've recorded examples of babies and toddlers falling out of windows and what have you, that they survive because they are relaxed, and adults can't do this because if they fall, they will immediately tense up so much.
That's right.
When they hit the ground, they will be very brittle.
That's the same about people that are highly intoxicated, or that drink a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of vodka. They would avoid serious lesions and injuries with falling, because
it's not recommended.
It's not recommended to try. But I heard the stories from Russia from some of my friends.
Oh, that's incredible. So once you, so where do we want to go now? Once we're talking about the conditioning of that contract that you have, not a written contract, but a contract that the client comes to you, and you have to overcome the fear by applying the single point of attention, and you have to also teach them about physiology so they can actually understand the processes. So where do we go from there?
That's right. When we understand the physiology of stress response, and it's not right away, we do it in parallel of different flows. You see, in understanding of that, I have different videos I send, and the narrative also. But you see, what is crucial here is to work with posture.
Okay.
In movement. Yes, in movement, not standing. We start with standing, actually.
Yeah.
What I used to work with, I used to start with learnings from Tai Chi. And from Tai Chi, I know that's a technique we call standing.
Yeah.
And that's the most powerful technique for health.
I remember someone telling me that in traditional Tai Chi, they stood underneath a very large oak table for the first year just to get the posture correct. It's incredible.
That's incredible. And that's why I really mean that we have to understand the right posture. Because in order to relax in the abdominal region, that because our diaphragm muscle is surrounded by many abdominal muscles.
Yeah.
And we can physiologically, we can only work with training stress response, only working with breathing muscle. And because breathing muscle is connected by the connective tissue with the abdominal muscle surrounding them, there's a lot of muscle pairs there. We have to stand right, and we have to move right, because if we don't, there will always be tension in this region. And the Buteyko technique, for example, that I work with, it's the prerequisite for Buteyko training, for successful Buteyko training, for getting a very, very high control pause, and kills the cancer, actually. It's the relaxation of abdominal muscle. We have to diminish the breathing, but the prerequisite is under certain circumstances, and the circumstances is the relaxation of the abdominal region.
Isn't that another funny thing? A funny thing there that we, you said about the breathing, the idea that you took a deep breath. When I was at school in England, the idea was with the posture that you should take a deep breath and hold your stomach in and your chest out. And from what you're telling me, that sounds like exactly the opposite of what you need to do.
That's a paradox. You see, there's a lot of misunderstanding in physiology. And I think actually working with paradoxes is very interesting, because people tend to remember the paradoxes because they are crazy. They are inexplicable. So people get, in a way, shocked initially. Then they start to understand, but they remember the formulation of the paradox. So that's paradoxical. Right? So because when you relax, you would hang, and that would, that's the way people think, that if you relax, you just hang, and that's a wrong posture. But you see, we can call it the art of hanging, because that's right. We have to train to hang in the right way. We have to actually train to hang, and that's why the standing, that's a very, very slow training, because there's lots of aspects in it. And I use many devices. First of all, I use a very big mirror that I installed in one of the rooms of my house, where I do the training. So the person can see himself in a very big mirror from the whole body.
Okay.
Then I use the weights with the rope with a weight. Okay. That I measure so I can see the line, the alignment of my body. And Tai Chi, good Tai Chi teachers would always learn these techniques. Not only movement, but the first thing to learn is standing, correct standing. And you have to always be corrected by the teacher in Tai Chi. You cannot see it yourself.
Wow.
You cannot see it. You cannot see it, because what we have. It's we have how is it called? If that we have different tensions of different pairs of muscles to remain in this position.
Yeah, we have
that that is normal for us. But when the teacher would see it in the, they would say, okay, you are not standing upright.
Yeah.
You are standing like that, or you're standing like that, but you cannot yourself sense it unless you can measure it. You see?
Okay.
With a downfalling rope, with a weight, or see it in the mirror, or work with a teacher. That's why I always do some corrective measures. And then when we learn standing, we start using the standing position in walking. And then I start working not only with body position, but also the position of the line of sight. How do I look at the surroundings? Where is my sight hits the ground or hits the horizon? Or if we're training in the woods, and I live in the woods, I always train with my clients in the woods. I love it. So if where do the sight hit the tree? Maybe.
Okay.
No, in the middle. If it does, then it's good. Then your sight is parallel. You are always looking parallel to the ground, and that you need really to train this one, because otherwise you would be afraid to fall. The most of us, we always look down.
Get a point of orientation. Yeah,
right, because we have to have a point of orientation. But the warriors in the old samurai legacy, they trained, and not only samurai, Tartars, the Mongol Genghis Khan warriors. Yeah. They trained on the archers. They trained sitting on their horse, watching in the mountains.
Wow.
So that's what we call it. We call it watching the mountains. That's the technique, watching the mountains. And watching the mountains means that it's the same technique, actually, that, I work a lot with tennis. And in tennis, the guy I really adore is Roger Federer.
Yeah.
And Roger Federer, I adore him because of his ability to move effortlessly on court. So when he hits the ball, he doesn't follow the ball to see where it hits the another court, because he knows where it hits. You see, he simplifies the movement very much, and to avoid faulty movements. So when he hit and the ball is flowing, he remains here, and then he starts moving immediately to the new position, but without looking where the ball hits. Only in the middle of this vector, from the point of the touch of the ball to the place in the middle of the court. Only in the middle of this movement, he sees the ball on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah? That's the technique of, that's what I teach tennis players. I have a program called breathingfortennis.com, and I have actually in Denmark here, I have some tennis athletes on pretty high level coming to me every week, and I teach them those techniques of not only breathing, but actually anti-stress techniques on court. And you see, when we start acquiring this knowledge and training it, then we start breathing exercise. And and when we start breathing exercise through the relaxation of the abdomen, and when we start understanding the principles of active relaxation, but not only active relaxation because it's in movement, but also I call it progressive active relaxation.
Okay.
You see what progressive active relaxation means. That's something from Aikido theory. because
Japanese martial arts.
Japanese martial
Aikido.
arts.
Yeah.
Aikido the school called Ki Aikido, and Ki Aikido is strictly internal martial arts. That's what we call internal martial arts.
Yeah, can you explain internal martial arts? It doesn't, it seems like an oxymoron.
Internal martial arts and external martial arts. In external martial arts, you focus very much on the movement and on your extremities.
Yeah.
Very often, external martial arts, they use the idea of ki-ai. And ki-ai, it's to go hard. And the another idea, it's called aiki. And aiki is the idea of using the energy of your opponent. So that's called the internal techniques. Okay, that's the internal technique. When you use, when you work a lot with relaxation, when you work with focus and defocus. So what we use for cancer here, because we're talking still about cancer.
Yeah,
we've been different places, in tennis and sports.
Well, it sounds like an amazing philosophy for life, let alone.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's why the problem,
especially for sportsmen.
That's right. That's right. So when we learned this, the warrior technology, the technology of standing, the understanding, the philosophy of process, the understanding of physiology, and we start doing breathing techniques. Then we connect all of these things together with progressive active relaxation from Aikido. That's what I wanted to say. And
progressive active relaxation.
Yeah, that's my term. That's my term.
Okay.
But I took it from Aikido training, where the relaxation, where you do the meditation in Aikido, subdividing always the room of your focus until sub-zero levels. That's a mental technique. That's a mental technique of Ki Aikido founder. So what I do, I really teach people, train people to understand that relaxation is not finite. How do you call it? Finite? Finite. That's right. Relaxation is not finite. And that's right. Just focus cannot help someone with cancer. But
it's a prerequisite. It's a prerequisite, though.
Prerequisite. We are talking about physiology.
Yeah, what you need to do before you can start treating.
Right, because now we're talking about, that's a comment. I don't think just focus can help someone with cancer. You are totally right. It cannot. That's why while working with physiology, we have to learn to avoid fear. But what we're talking about right now, just you don't misunderstand. You don't have a misconception about what we are doing. We are not. We are only using these techniques to avoid, to train to avoid fear of death, just to be able to train physiology. Because if we are not training physiology, we will not get results. Okay, you see, that's active progressive, active relaxation. And the idea is that relaxation can always be fuller. You see?
Yeah, of course. It's not, so it's infinite. It's an endless process.
So it's always the process. After 8 years of training relaxation, I can now relax on a level while I'm moving that I never thought is possible. You see?
Okay.
And you're right again. We can avoid death. Most people do not want to die, and it will never work.
Just explain. Someone's putting. I don't think these comments will come on the YouTube video, but someone, Austin Golder, he's put a comment there. He said, "We can avoid death. Most people do not want to die. It will never work." And Misha's he's going to comment on that because he's. Go ahead, Misha.
Yes. Well, let's move forward because you see. what we are talking about now, we're talking about physiology. And what I want you to understand, all of you guys, that in order to oxygenate the cells, and using Buteyko technique, and that's a hardcore technique because
we'll handle this question a little later.
We'll handle it later. We need to do it with relaxed diaphragm, because when we have relaxed diaphragm, one very, very serious thing happens. We can reprogram medulla oblongata.
Yes.
It's the prerequisite.
Okay.
If we're doing mindfulness breathing, all of these things,
forget it. Yeah.
It works. That's right. But forget it.
Yeah.
Because it will not reprogram your automatical breathing patterns 24/7.
No.
That's what is the difference.
Okay. Medulla oblongata is this, it sits on top of your spine under the brain, and basically it controls the parasympathetic system, which is the breathing. So you have to, by doing the Buteyko training, you're actually reprogramming. It's like it's not hardwired. It's actually can be repaid. It's like a BIOS on a computer. It's below the normal interface level. This is below that level, the parasympathetic system, and you're reprogramming that to accept more carbon dioxide in your.
That's right. Okay. What we do, we actually reprogram medulla oblongata. Because medulla oblongata works on the level of chemoreceptors in the blood. You see, chemoreceptors in the blood, they are constantly measuring for different chemical substances in the blood.
Yeah.
You see? And we have something that is called ventilatory response. And the ventilatory response is regulated by medulla oblongata. And you see, we have different values of when the medulla oblongata responds to the heightening levels of different chemical substances. For example, we have oxygen in the blood, and we have carbon dioxide in the blood. So you see, if we're talking percentage, then the sensitivity of medulla oblongata towards the breathing patterns, the changing of breathing patterns on carbon dioxide and on oxygen are very, very different. And you see, it's like 20 times bigger sensitivity on the change of levels of carbon dioxide in the blood.
Okay, I just want to stop there because we're getting an interesting. Some interesting comments coming out. I think the Austin Gold there seems to be a practitioner in breathing mindfulness. I think I'm right in saying that. Says you're a confused person. What I think is missing here is that the cornerstone of the process to allow people to cure themselves of cancer is the oxygenation of cells, which is achieved by retaining more carbon dioxide in the blood. And this is done by using a technique that was originally designed for asthma patients by Konstantin Buteyko, and it's called Buteyko breathing. So to say it doesn't work, as I say, the reason I'm here is that I'm fascinated and enthralled, and it's amazing the results that Misha Sakharov has achieved. A personal friend of mine had the worst, most aggressive form of brain tumor, and by following this process that Misha has developed, he managed to. He was a terminal patient. And the neurologist said, after rescanning him, saying, "Well, there's nothing left, only scar tissue." And Michaud has replicated this with other forms of cancer, leukemia. I think I'm right in saying, And, you know, to say it doesn't work is not true. There are people who will testify, and there are also doctors who will testify that that Misha is actually onto something here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Misha.
I replicated it in many. I replicated it not only for cancer. I replicated it for diabetes, and not only for diabetes 2, also for diabetes 1. I replicated or for CFS, which is very, very hard to work with. It's called chronic fatigue syndrome. I replicated for leukemia. I replicated it now for another glioblastoma patient, glioblastoma 4. That's the worst brain tumor you can get. So now I'm working with many clients with lymphomas, Hodgkin lymphoma, different kinds of things, and different kinds of cancers. And I see very good results and improvement. And with the latest case, I just wrote an article about chronic lymphatic leukemia, that it's actually disappeared only with my methods, because I worked with the client for 6 months without chemo and without radiation, only with my protocol. And
I think it might be interesting, maybe not this time, but maybe at a future time, the people who have some professional interest here. It might be interesting to actually, you know, if Misha agrees to it, is actually to have one of these use Blab for a debate and actually take up these points, because I'm pretty confident that Misha, I'm not saying he's got the answer for everything, but Misha has thought this through very much indeed. It's very impressive how he's pulled these different principles, different areas together. And I think if Misha is in agreement with that, if the people who will contact us or go to Misha's website, sakharov.com, drop a comment there, I'm sure we would. How do you feel about that, Misha? Would you accept the challenge of talking to anyone about this publicly?
Sure. And we also do Periscope sessions, so people can ask me questions. Here, you know, we have a very concrete, concrete thing. We're talking about cancer healing, medicine free. We're talking about one-pointed attention training and Hara. And I would like to keep to the topic. And yes, I will answer the questions afterwards, the last 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much. And I will use a simple English. That's right. Because I'm Russian. I always use simple English.
And I just use complicated English.
I cannot use complicated English. No. Complicated English. Okay. Okay. So, single point of attention training actually allows us to reprogram automatical breathing patterns 24/7. And these automatical breathing patterns, reprogramming automatical breathing patterns is a part of a multifunctional breathing therapy called Buteyko therapy. Why is this multifunctional? Because when we reestablish the normal gas balance in the lungs and in the blood, we change the body state towards equilibrium. And equilibrium is balance. And our body have 13 physiological systems that all are interconnected and all are tubular. And it means they are all in some way controlled by regulation of the
vessels,
of the vessels, and you see of the blood vessels, and we have smooth muscles in all these systems, in some way, you know, because they are interconnected and interdependent. And what we do by this multifunctional therapy, actually, we relax smooth muscle. By relaxation of the smooth muscle, we get a stronger heart. We reestablish the normal cardiovascular system. the same time, that's a carbon dioxide. That's a relaxant. That's actually a hormone. The carbon dioxide is a hormone.
So it causes this vasodilation.
The last 10 years in the exams for medical schools in America, they use the multiple choice question asking carbon dioxide hormone or not? Yes, no. And people that say no, they actually have to go to again
reset the exam.
The recent exam.
You got it wrong.
Because the carbon dioxide now consider it being a hormone because it controls many different functions in the body. And if we just get rid of it, as we used to hear, that is normal, to just get rid of the carbon dioxide, then we die because the carbon dioxide level has to be not lower than 3. It has to be in the span between 3 and 7.5, where the most of us have about 4.5. The biggest part of the population of the world has the level of carbon dioxide in 4.5, between 4 and 4.5.
Yeah,
that's the 90% of the Western world. And
okay,
that means that they are very at 3 we die. 5 is normal.
Can I just say something there? I'm just looking. One of the questions about someone asked about. There was a situation in the country where the gentleman comes from, where he said that chemical weapons were used, and is there any relation chemical weapons to cancer? Well, there certainly is environmental causes or environmental causes of cancer. We see that a lot today. There's a lot of plastic pollution, there's a lot of air pollution, a lot of particle pollution, and there's there's a lot of cancer. That is obviously caused by the food we eat, or probably what is in the food we eat, such as pesticides and what have you. But the thing is, it's interesting. It's interesting what you say, Misha. You said yesterday that, or day before yesterday, that that the buteyko breathing was the CP, the so-called CP, was a lot higher 100 years ago than it is today. You're saying that levels of carbon dioxide in the blood are a lot lower than they were some time before, and obviously they're both closely related. But given the fact that in many countries, the so-called lifestyle diseases, of which cancer is one, if you could call it a metabolic lifestyle disease, diabetes, heart circulatory problems, and Alzheimer's, and these ones, that for some reason, we are getting more and more in Western society. And what is more significant, that the countries in the Far East that are adopting our so-called, our Western lifestyle, they're also seeing great increases in the frequency of these diseases, and I think that's a very, very significant point. I don't know what you think, Misha.
That's right, because if the environment is polluted as it is by the using chemical weapons, well, the chemical weapons, that's I would guess it has a very, very strong reaction to our body, different body processes, oxygenation and different metabolic processes. So what would trigger cancer? You see, the cancer is triggered by the instability in the system. And we can say that what we call in the breathing, we call the formation of reactive oxygen species. That's that they are reactive because they are unstable. And you see the same thing we see in the nutrition. We have something called polyunsaturated fats. And if we go in this philosophical way of thinking, you see there's also instability because they have something they call double bonds. And these double bonds, they make them unstable, and they make them actually influence all the other chemical substances that we need in the body. So they are pollution. They are they are poisonous for our body. And the same thing, you know, if we get some of the parts of the chemical weapons into our system, they will react on the same way as the reactive species. They will destabilize the system. And when they destabilize the system, they will stress the system. They will change the breathing. They will change the pH. Normally, you know, when we are under environmental stress and psychological stress, we get something that is called respiratory alkalosis in the blood. So the blood goes from the very, very finely defined borders of 7.35 to 7.45. You see, it goes up. It becomes alkaline. And that triggers another response that called metabolic acidosis. So we get acidity in the tissue. And that's a very, very high instability. And that triggers cancer because when we get the metabolic acidosis in the tissues, all of the cells of the body starts lacking oxygen. So they are triggered into the state. They are forced to go into the other metabolic state.
Okay.
And
okay, Misha.
Cancer.
Okay, Misha, I'm sure that you've done your homework on this one. You've done research. I'm sure that you can back everything you've said to now with the research references.
Yeah.
So that's without doubt. Now we're coming up to nearly.
About reference, just a second.
Yeah.
If you go to my site, Sakharov.com,
I
have all the scientific studies, bit about breathing, what I'm talking about, and about diet. About all the just read about this, and you can have testimonials with my clients, and a lot of articles. I wrote about 200 articles.
Okay. Well, Misha, we're coming up to 1 hour, so I think we should wrap up soon. But I mean, it's perfectly, it's a free forum that people can have their opinions and. And I'm sure, Misha, you like everyone else who comes up with a completely different way of thinking, you get this resistance followed by rejection, and then eventually people say, "Oh yes, of course, it was absolutely clear." But if there are one or two serious questions, specific questions, what we're talking about, which was the single point of attention, which is the use of Hara to relax, to create this relaxation, to overcome the fear that cancer patients have of obviously of death, then you're very, very, very welcome to say that, to speak now. But if anyone's got a serious question, guys, please put your question in now. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap up because we've got an hour. We have an hour, and we'll take up what are we going to talk about next time.
I have an idea. We have to go and talk about something called therapeutic ketosis and how to use it.
Therapeutic ketosis, about the diet.
The ketogenic diet. And we're going to talk about caloric restriction, how it works, the caloric restriction, the pathways for cancer, the pathways for diabetes, for neurodegenerative disease. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting, about these pathways. So that's what I tell my clients.
Okay. Yes. Well, let's hope we can get some lively. We really love to see these comments and everything. Of course, there's skeptics out there. I'm a skeptic as well. That's why I keep asking Misha about this, because I say I'm not a medical practitioner, but I think I do have a little bit of understanding, and it's very important that, of course, Misha, you have to explain this thing to your clients. They have to understand it in their terms, so they can actually proceed with this treatment. So I think we'll wrap it up there. It's gone 1 hour. Thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed the replay. We're going to put it on YouTube quite soon. So Misha, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve, for very good questions. Very inspiring to talk to you. Well, thank you all the guys for joining us. And
we'll try and do this tomorrow, yeah?
Yes, subscribe and come on and see some of the other blabs. That's
some of the other blabs.
That's a new word for me.
Yeah, we'll have a good blab about it. Okay. All right then. Bye.
Bye-bye.